Hello, and welcome to another Ardenwood Presents webinar, this time on long-term care insurance for Christian Scientists. Thank you for joining us today. I'm John Mitchell, and I serve as Executive Director and CEO of Ardenwood here in San Francisco, where we have cobalt blue skies today. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. Ardenwood exists because you value having a place to go for rest, study, and healing as practicing Christian Scientists. At the same time, we're committed to offering inspiring and informational webinars on timely and important topics like Medicare and long-term care insurance that work well for Christian Scientists. Ardenwood is a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization. This means it requires income from our patients, residents, and guests, as well as donations from you to meet our operating expenses. You are invaluable to Ardenwood. Your support enables us to offer uninterrupted services, something we've been doing every day since May of 1930. In return, we want to provide you with the best possible care and special events like this one. You bring out the best in us, and we thank you. By the way, our next online event is our annual meeting on Sunday, May 5th at 2 p.m. Pacific. Madeline Maupin is our inspirational speaker, and the title of her talk is Moving at the Impulse of the Holy Spirit. You can register on our website, ardenwood.org. You won't want to miss it. Now, before we begin, I'd like to share a few thoughts with you about today's topic, long-term care for Christian Scientists. Well, that sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? Like jumbo shrimp or deafening silence. Isn't that fun? We know healing is always possible and doesn't need to take a long time. Long-term care suggests the exact opposite. So why are we talking about it? And why are we grateful that so many of you are here today or have registered? Because Christian Scientists are wiser than serpents, and they make informed personal decisions. Just as important, they don't want to be a burden to their families, not physically, emotionally, or financially. So what is long-term care? Well, in spiritual terms, we might describe it as the proposition that we are forever in God's care. It's also a long-term commitment to behold the perfect man for ourselves and for our loved ones, for everyone. In the world's terms, long-term care is custodial care. It assists you with your daily life when you're unable to care for yourself, care fully for yourself. In this sense, Ardenwood is not a long-term care facility. It is not a nursing home. Or in today's terms, we might say there is no parking here. People who come to Ardenwood come for healing. They expect to be healed. Healing is our primary focus. Sometimes it takes longer than others. Financing care through Medicare and supplemental insurance helps cover these shorter-term needs while the patient is actively, metaphysically addressing the specific claims or challenges to their well-being. We've all experienced unexpected circumstances in life, one that encourage us to be better prepared and force us to grow. Long-term care insurance is one way to ensure that your care needs and wishes are met without burdening your family. One of the most important first steps is to complete an advanced healthcare directive, or an AHCD, and also to let your family know where it is located. Nancy will be talking more about that in a little bit. You can find an example of one on our website, ardenwood.org. Scroll to the bottom of the homepage and click on Healthcare Documents. Finally, the content shared today is only informational. It is not intended to be legal advice. A replay of this presentation will be available on our website very soon, probably by tomorrow. Replays of all our webinars are available to you on our website under Events. Let me remind you that you can ask questions at any time using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll answer as many as possible at the end of today's presentation. And now let me introduce our presenters, Jim Maher, Katie Burris, and Nancy Sedan. Jim Maher is a certified senior advisor and a broker consultant specializing in Medicare, He's also a certified long-term care insurance strategist. Jim has talked to literally thousands of Christian Scientists since we had our first webinar, answering innumerable questions about Medicare, long-term care insurance, and estate planning. He's been a tremendous blessing to our field. And from what he's told me, he has loved meeting and working with all of you. Katie Burris is a Medicare specialist and certified long-term care consultant, helping individuals with their Medicare and long-term care planning strategies. Katie is a partner at McGrew & Maher Insurance Services and has been in the business for nearly 20 years. She is licensed for life insurance, long-term care, insurance, and Medicare in several states. Nancy Sedan is our finance director here at Ardenwood. And through her work for us, she has gained many years of experience working with Medicare and other healthcare insurance policies. So Jim, Katie, and Nancy, take it away.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much for having us. We'll get that up there. So we're going to talk about long-term care, planning for your future. He's Jim Maher. I'm Katie Burris. And we're going to talk today about what long-term care is and about the different strategies for planning for care. So when we talk about what is long-term care, it's care needed if you can't perform, they call them activities of daily living. So when you're working and they have disability insurance, this would be if you're no longer working and you need help with those activities of daily living. So transferring, like getting up out of a bed, out of a chair, if you need help going to the bathroom, bathing, if you need help dressing or eating, or continence issues, or if you're having memory issues. So when we talk about long-term care, this is what they refer to when you need help with those activities. And John kind of mentioned it, that long-term care, it's not a place, it's not a condition, but it's a life-changing event that happens when you now need care and you need to prepare in case you do.
Right. It's having a plan, because long-term care really impacts the family more than it does anyone else. It really does. And we're going to show and talk about some examples about how that really does impact your family and your loved ones.
Mm-hmm. So you expect a long life experience, and you really just want to make sure that you're planning for it and that you take the pressure off your family or your friends. So long-term care and retirement planning. Long-term care should be in every single retirement plan. And what we see is most retirement plans don't have that as a function. They haven't prepared for a long-term care event correctly. It's, if I need it, we'll worry about it then.
Right. And it's super important. You know, we always talk about mitigating, you know, risk in retirement, and most people go, well, I don't think that's going to happen to me. I hope it never happens to me. If it does happen to me, I've got some money set aside. But it's really not. It's more than that. It's so impactful, and it impacts everybody: adult children, grandchildren, family, friends. It really does.
And we talk about this a lot, and we mention this, I think, every time we talk, that Medicare does not cover long-term care. There's confusion out there that Medicare will be there as a kind of a gap stop or to help with long-term care costs, and that is not what Medicare's function is.
That's right. And I know we're talking with Christian Scientists, so in the non-Christian Science world, right, we see a lot of people that do need help. They go in if they have a chronic type condition. I'm trying not to mention anything. So if they have chronic type condition or they break something, Medicare really works like this, where if you're in a hospital for 3 days and discharged and you need some type of skilled care. So if in the example where somebody falls and breaks a hip, normally a skilled rehab involves getting your gait back, using physical and occupational therapy, getting you back to where you can get out of that facility. So that's skilled care. It's not custodial or long-term care. When you become stable, in that situation, the facility normally looks to you and says, okay, listen, you don't really need skilled care now. You need long-term care or custodial care, help with bathing, dressing, things like that. They're going to ask you for payment, right? They're not shy about asking for you and saying Medicare is no longer covering that. So how are you going to pay?
And long-term care is important. I know, Nancy, when we talk about, what Medicare covers, that there are instances where people come to Ardenwood and Medicare doesn't cover, and that's where it becomes a long-term care need.
Right.
So with the different planning options, the first one, and most people do this because the default is you're going to self-fund. So if you don't have a plan in place, this just happens automatically, and you have to decide what assets you're going to set aside for care. You want to make sure that it's not going to cause a cash flow crisis. What most people don't think about is when you need care, you still have all the expenses you've had, home, mortgage, power, everything that you've had in addition to needing care on top of it. The second option is Medi-Cal or Medicaid. That is the default that happens if you don't have the money to pay for care or you've spent the money that you had. The problem with that, and Jim says this every single time, is you're not in control of the care because Medi-Cal makes the decisions.
That's exactly right. And the last option is having some type of insurance plan, right? And I've been doing this for a long time, since 1989, and back in the day, they didn't say long-term care, they would actually call it nursing home care. So that doesn't sound very marketable. So now it's long-term care, and there's all types of plans. Most plans out there it's just like buying another homeowners or auto policy where you're going to pay on a plan forever, essentially until you use it. And the problem with a lot of those traditional plans is they've had massive rate increases. In California, as well as other states, many of the insurance companies are no longer selling long-term care plans. In California, it's really hard to find somebody that sells a traditional long-term care plan. And we're going to talk about other options later on here. But basically, when you buy any type of insurance, you're really simply transferring the risk from yourself to the insurance company.
So long-term care insurance is a policy that's meant to provide a tax-free income to help cover long-term care costs. That's the only reason for that policy. So when you need help with those activities of daily living, that's when it kicks in. It can cover you at home, depending on what type of care you're getting. And then it can also cover you in a licensed facility or an assisted living facility, or even at a Christian Science facility if you have the right type of plan.
Yeah, and we just had, so we've been doing this, like I said, for many, many years, and we just had a client call, and he does have a long-term care policy with us, and he's able to use the benefits, right? He needs help with a couple of the activities of daily living. And he said, does my policy cover grab bars and home modification? They want to pull a carpet up and make wheelchair access. And the answer is yes, it does. So these policies have multi-purpose. They're not just for strictly care in a facility.
They also cover you, we call it kind of like the practical side of care. Insurance companies call them the instrumental activities of daily living. But what they are the day-to-day things that happen. So whether you need help with shopping, you need help being driven somewhere, cooking, you need help with cleaning, laundry, any sort of housekeeping, that's also where this policy can help as well.
So I'm not going to use any more client examples. I'm going to use my family example. So we have a situation with my mother-in-law right now where she at one time had a long-term care policy, and through some not very good financial planning ended up dropping that unbeknownst to me years ago. So unfortunately, she needs help right now. And my wife and my sister-in-law are now the caregivers. And everything you see on there is what they're doing right now for her. My mother-in-law, I always tell her she's my favorite mother-in-law, but she's a great person, a Christian. but now she needs help with all these. She can't do anything anymore. So my wife and my sister-in-law provide, they do the shopping, the cooking, the transportation, and myself and my brother-in-law, we also help with other things around the house too. But it gets everybody involved. And I always think they say, well, it's just about my mother-in-law. It's really not. It impacts my wife, my sister-in-law, their family, right? They have grandchildren. It impacts when you can go over and see them, if you can bring them over. I can't do that now. I have to go see mom and take care of her. So it really does. It's very impactful to everybody that's a caregiver.
It really is. And we're going to talk about the circle of care. So this is really where we're seeing everybody that's affected by this care. So the first one, and really the nucleus of this, is the care recipient. So the person that needs care, in Jim's example, his mother-in-law. So she needs, physical care. And so the primary caregiver is now Jim's wife. And so that affects your wife and her day-to-day activities that she can do.
Right.
You're a secondary caregiver with your
Right.
brother-in-law having to go over there and help. And we're also seeing that community support. So friends, neighbors that come over to visit, but everybody in that entire circle of care is affected.
And right, and adult children or grandchildren, they naturally step up because they do it out of love. Like in most families, like I also had experience with my mom and dad. I was a caregiver for them. My father made 102. So I ended up doing a lot of things for him. And it's kind of interesting because my mom's the one who had the long-term care policy needed for a very short period of time. My dad said, I'm not going to worry about that. It's never going to happen to me. And eventually, well, when you make 102, things happen, right? Things happen. You need a little assistance. And you do it out of love. I would have done anything for my parents, and I made sure I was there, but it did. It has a ripple down effect on how it impacted, going down to San Jose on the weekends and not being home and not being around to do family things sometimes because somebody's got to take care of my parents. And that was me. I had a sibling who didn't want to do much, to be quite honest. So I became the primary caregiver. So it does cause a burden. It really does.
So what we find is providing care not only affects the person that receives the care, but it affects the entire family, both emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
We've seen very often that providing care to someone who is ill makes the caregiver ill as well. It's very, very hard to care for someone.
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah, my aunt who was taking care of my uncle. Again, this is all family. I come from a large Irish family. So we've got a ton of aunts and uncles and cousins, but she was taking care of him. And she had a chronic condition that came back, quite honestly, due to the stress, and everything just wrapped around taking care of her husband, of my uncle at the time. And it really did. It made her physically and emotionally ill, unfortunately.
We see providing care can cause issues with adult children, especially if you have one doing, more of the physical and the on-site care, and you have others maybe not doing the same. Sometimes that's just due geographically, or that they have other things going on. We don't find a lot of times that children are brought together from this,
Yes.
that it tears them apart because maybe they have different ideas of what that care should look like or should cost. And sometimes they're surprised by the cost of it.
They're absolutely surprised. And then they want to know whose money are they spending? Another real life example, I think I've shared it before with aunt and uncle down in the San Jose area. This is a different one, and they were staying in a facility, and it was really expensive. And one of them needed assistance with memory care, and that was really, they were talking about $28,000 a month for both of them down in Willow Glen area. And one of my cousins said, "Hey, you're the Medicare long-term care guy. Why didn't you do something about it?" And I go, "Well, we did have the conversation. I'm very good about sharing what I do with my family members because I don't want them to come back and say, how come you didn't help?" So we had that conversation, and they had assets. They had 3 homes, and they decided they didn't have a ton of liquid cash, but they own 3 really nice homes in San Jose and one over in the Santa Cruz area. And remember, these are when they paid $50,000 or $75,000 for homes that are now worth $1.5 million. So they're like, well, we have plenty of money, not to worry for our care. Well, unfortunately, my cousin didn't feel like that. She's going, well, we have to sell a home. And I go, well, that's what one of the homes was for. And she goes, we don't want to sell a home. And I go, well, that's not your home yet. She goes, but we don't want to sell the home because that's really appreciated in value. And we really like that home. And I go, but it's not your home and that's your parents' wishes. Well, the 2 other siblings said, that's mom and dad's money and their home. And it's geared for that. So it causes friction. And they had a plan. It just wasn't a great plan. Because when you have to sell assets, and by the way, when you sell assets and you have to, you never get what you want for it because you have to sell it kind of like, hey, I need the money. And if it's $1.5 million home, you may end up getting 1.3 million, which in the Bay Area, that's a big hit for people. They're like terrified they only get $1.3 million. But it does. It causes animosity. And they planned. It just wasn't a great plan. But that's what they wanted to do. And if they would have taken some of those monies and simply done some type of insurance planning, that would have not caused the friction between the adult children, my cousins, in that example.
We think it's just really important to stop and think that if or when you needed care, where would you want to receive care? Most people haven't even thought of that or what that would look like. Most importantly, who will provide that care? What we see sometimes is that the person that would need the care has an idea in mind, and maybe you haven't had that conversation with family members or friends, maybe like adult children, about who would provide the care. And that's a really, really important decision to talk about because you want to make sure that you're on the same page. So when you need care, that whoever is going to be there to provide the care or hopefully oversee the care knows. Also, who or how will it be paid
Right.
for? Because we find we get calls every single week from Christian Science families, non-Christian Science families going, my parent has Medicare. Does that cover long-term care? And we let them know that no, it doesn't.
And then the next question is, how do we pay for that? And I go, well, you have to write a check. Well, whose checking account are we using? I go, well, you're going to use hopefully your parents. But that comes up every single time in that order. Who's going to pay for it? How much is and who pays? And I go, well, fortunately, if your parents have the money, you're going to write a check. And they go, well, that's a lot of money. And doesn't the Medicare, Medicaid, Medi-Cal thing cover them? And the answer is no, it does not. And that causes issues right away. It really does. And you hate to see that because ultimately you love your parents and you want to provide what's best for them. But sometimes it becomes financial and it does. People fight over money.
The other thing too is I know John mentioned that advanced healthcare directive. Sometimes when, if you don't have that filled out, you should, and I'll let Nancy talk about the importance of that. But that can also be an opening to also talk to whoever is going to be on your advanced healthcare directive to help out about here's what my long-term care plan is as well. And that's super important to have, right, Nancy, that advanced healthcare directive?
Yes, it's a legal document that helps you decide ahead of time what your choice of care could be where you're not able to specify it yourself, as well as appoint an individual to act as your representative to make sure that your care needs or your care choices are honored. And so it's as Katie says, it's a good opportunity to think these things through and talk with the right people. Obviously, if you're going to appoint somebody, you'd want to talk to them and make sure they know that that's what you're wanting, and then make sure that the document that also allows you to make some other choices about care, is in a place that everyone knows where they can find it. Some people will create it as a PDF file and share it electronically. We have some patients and some visiting nurse patients that like to have it on file with us, but you could share it with your family and specifically with the person you've appointed. And those are good options. We've had some people say, "Oh, I actually keep it on my refrigerator,"
Right.
which is I don't know. Some people might want to do that, but the idea being that it's in a place where someone would know where it was easily. And this has come in handy in some cases, and so it's something to consider. And again, as John mentioned earlier, you can find a form, a blank form. I'll give you an idea of what it's all about on our website at ardenwood.org. And you scroll down to the bottom on the home screen and just look for healthcare documents. And you'll see the template that you could evaluate and see if it's right for you.
And it's so important to have those conversations. In our experience, I found that it really relieves a lot of anxiety with adult children to know that mom and dad or mom or dad have a plan, right? And this is what the plan is going to be. And they've expressed their beliefs and their wishes to their adult children. And, you know, it's not an easy conversation because no one wants to really talk about it, but it's super important. And I found adult children feel totally relieved knowing, hey, mom or okay, they think it could possibly happen, but if it does, here's the plan going forward.
Yep. One of the questions we get asked most often is, what does care cost? So we're looking at 2023 versus 2024. Also, the projection for 2034. We did it based on the San Francisco Bay Area, since that's where Ardenwood is located. In 2023, if you needed a home health aide for 44 hours a week average, you were looking at about $85.80 per month. That has jumped up. We know inflation is everywhere, so we're seeing that about $8,800 per month this year. And in 2034, that is projected to be almost $12,000 a month.
It's unbelievable. We were actually didn't want to put numbers going out to 2044 or anything because it scares people. You're like, there's no way it can be that costly. There's no chance. And I remember back in 1989, you know, if I sold a policy and it was for more than $75 a day, they thought I was doing a disservice to someone. And it just goes to show you how the rates and everything, like the cost of living, especially with healthcare, has gone sky high. I mean, think about it, and that's for a home healthcare. Nobody wants to leave their home, is what I found. Most people love their home, they want to stay there and want to have care come in. And the next step is, okay, that's too pricey. What's our next step, right?
And that's where other options come in because of the cost of care at home. So an assisted living facility for a private room, last year we were looking about $7,500 a month on average. This year, $7,700. And if we go out to 2034, we're looking at about $10,400. So expensive, but what we're seeing is when that care gets great, people go there instead of a home health.
Yeah, and you see that, you know, going in, a lot of the facilities have residential care that goes into assisted living. So if you start off in residential care, I'm going to use the numbers in the Sacramento area up here, you're normally anywhere from about $4,000 to $4,200 a month just for residential care. And if you need assisted living, they're going to add on, you need more help with whatever it is taking you down to breakfast or for your meals. So it adds up, and you're probably looking realistically in the $5,000 to $5,500 a month range. And when my dad was receiving care, and that was 10 or 12 years ago, we were in the $3,000 range, the $3,000 to $3,200, which I thought was pretty reasonable. And nothing's changed. I mean, the services are still the same, the facility's still the same. It's just the costs for labor just keep going up. It becomes cost prohibitive to a lot of people.
And what we're seeing, like if you need a higher level of care, you're looking at over 13,000 last year, almost 13,500 this year, and over 18 projected by
Right.
2030.
So when we say 18, people go, no, there's no way that could possibly be 18,000. And you know, the numbers are higher in other states like New York and in the East Coast, they're a lot higher. And we just tell people you just have to have, if you've got a plan and have money set aside, that's something, but no plan at all. When that happens, it just destroys people and it destroys their adult children because everybody goes into panic mode. There is no plan. Mom or dad didn't do any planning. What do we do?
So with long-term care plans, using the life insurance company's money or annuities, why would you do that? It's because you can leverage your money. You can turn your money into 2, 3, 4, 5 or more times what you have to use for long-term care. These are not the old type of life insurance policies. So people think about, the policies that your parents had, maybe cover you per day for, a little bit here and there, and it has to be in a facility. It can't be at home. That's not how these work anymore. You do get that tax-free long-term care benefit. There is on all of these a tax-free death benefit if you don't use it. And really, it's a way to just increase your payouts.
Right. So, when you can tell the government is behind something, when they make it tax-free or tax deductible, that's saying they want you to take advantage of these plans. The government really doesn't want to provide care for you. They want you to do something about it. And in some states, they're forcing people to take out long-term care policies while they're working, right? If you look at the state of Washington, they're having they force you to buy policies. But when you talk about using life insurance, people always go, well, why would I want to use life insurance for a long-term care plan? Like Katie said, you're going to get a benefit back. And it's always going to be tax-free. You put money in, you're going to get a multiple for your long-term care, maybe 2 or 3 times that right away. So, and I hate to use numbers, but people always say, give me an example. So if $100,000 goes into a policy, whether you paid over 20 years or your life or 5 years or a lump sum, there's all kinds of different options you can do. But you get a death benefit right away, which is tax-free. So if you pass away and you don't use it, you're going to get more than what you put into the policy tax-free. You're going to get some type of, like we said, a long-term care benefit that you can use for home care, residential assisted living, right? And eventually, nursing home is normally right before when somebody passes normally. That's normally what we see. But this is about keeping you out of a long-term care facility and keep you home to have monies to do it. And the other option too is with life insurance, you can always cash it out and get monies back. Annuities, and I just want to go over this quickly, and people always go, well, annuities, I don't know what they are. I've heard my brother-in-law, my neighbor said they're really bad. I shouldn't do an annuity. And I go, well, you have Social Security? Well, yeah, I love that, right? It's guaranteed payment for the rest of your life. Annuities function like that. Ultimately, if you have money in there and you're going to take it out, it pays a lifetime. So if you've put $100,000 in, it ends up paying $200,000 or $300,000 out. That's the advantage of an annuity. But these annuities that we found, and it's kind of interesting, they have annuities with long-term care riders. And as Christian Scientists, this is kind of a good deal for you because it's based on your health. So if I buy this particular annuity, which means I put money in, it grows tax deferred, right? I don't pay any tax on it. And if I'm healthy enough, right, and I can answer all their health questions, no, which most Christian Scientists are no to all the questions, you can get triple the amount that you put into your policy for long-term care benefit.
On day one.
On day one. And this, I just did an individual and a 65-year-old in California, and I even wrote it down. I was pretty impressed, actually. They didn't want to buy a long-term care policy. So they said, I have money sitting around. And I said, why not look at this annuity? And they go, we really don't want an annuity. We've heard they were bad. So I said, okay, we'll just take a look at it and see if it fits. And so we ran the illustration, and it showed, in this case, it was $100,000 going in, and at 65, she got more long-term care. And right, if she passed away, the beneficiaries are still going to get all the money back or most of the money back. But at 85, we ran it out. From putting that money in at 85, she had over $525,000 to use for long-term care, which would pay out over $8,000 a month. So they're not always bad. You know, I think sometimes people just assume something's, boy, I heard they're bad and they're not worth looking at. But sometimes for long-term care, when people have money sitting around, I say it's an option. You take a look at it, you decide, and if you're a Christian Scientist, you think about it, you pray about it, and decide, is that going to be a good move for me, right? And I think we're really good about showing people options and saying, you have to think about it, talk to your adult children. And by the way, I've never seen adult children that said, Mom or Dad, don't buy one. Yeah, we'll take care of you, but do you have the money for us to do that? So normally adult children are very pro do something with those monies. And if you can turn it into, like Katie said, leverage, right? If I can turn 100,000 into 500,000 in this example for care, when she's probably going to need it, right? In her mid 80s, that's not a bad thing, right? The money was going to sit there anyways in the CD and earn, a couple percent, but not much.
So what you're trying to do, unpredictable. I don't like unpredictable. Jim doesn't like unpredictable. Right. You really want to turn that unpredictable situation into something predictable because you've done that long-term care planning ahead of time. You really don't want to have to turn family or friends into caregivers if they're not ready or able to do that or wanting to do that. And you can have your family supervise your care instead of providing it. And
that's huge.
It's
right.
Huge.
It's huge. You would much rather be able to go in and tell the caregiver, this is what Mom needs. And this is what she's, all the hygiene and the food preparation, everything. You want to supervise that. Most of the time you don't want to provide it. And the other thing I was going to say, family and friends, here's the difference. Friends are awesome. And, I had a family friend, a very good friend. He was kind of like an uncle. And his plan was, he told me, he goes, well, I got all my buddies and they're going to take care of me if something happens to me. And when that time happened, when he needed help, you know what his friend said? That's awesome, Dick. Where's your family? Right? These are guys. And they're going, well, that's great, but I'm your friend. What do you want us to do about it? So friends are, I'm there for you until push came to shove and he needed assistance. And then like, where's your family? What are they going to do to help you? Quite honestly.
That's not really who you want to rely on as that primary caregiver.
That's exactly right.
And you really just want to make sure that you're protecting your retirement assets so you can leave more to family, so that you have the money there to pay for the care if you need it. I mean, really at the end of the day, like, do not let this happen to you.
I just want to make one more point about using the insurance company's money, like it said on that last slide. It is so much easier to use insurance companies' monies than your own. When you talk about writing checks, sometimes you go, well, it's $4,000 or $5,000. You go, well, it's not that big a deal. Until you physically start writing checks out for $8,000 or $12,000, and you're going, wow, that's really eating into Mom's savings. The reason I say Mom, in the non-Christian Science world, I'm not sure if this is true, Nancy can probably tell me, most females outlive males, right? Their mortality is normally in the mid 80s, and males, we die sooner. That's just reality. But it's so much easier to use insurance companies' money than writing money out of your mom's checking account for her and watching that total go down.
It's really, honestly, we always say, you want to protect your most important asset, and that's your family. Making sure that, you're not causing unnecessary strife. And we do say, like, seriously, please have this conversation with your adult children or whoever you want to, provide the care, so that it's not a surprise to them. That's not the kind of surprise people like.
No, you don't. It causes, it's just part of your human behavior. It causes stress and emotions, and people worry about the money. You can say, well, they're not going to worry about the money, and that becomes the number one objection for most adult children and on anything is, well, it's going to cost too much. It really is. So there's lots of great options out there. Today was simply about trying to give you some options. We didn't want to show a lot of illustrations because with long-term care, it's personal. So what's good for myself may not be good for Katie. What's good for myself may not be good for Nancy or John or anybody like that. Everybody's different. And what I've learned about Christian Scientists is that you're all individuals and everybody is different. You have different needs. People have different assets, family members that are now either Christian Scientists or not, right? We see that too. So we just want to be here as kind of, you can call us or email us or talk to us about, is this something I should consider?
And we can provide you, an illustration. We can walk you through what it would cost in your situation. No obligation.
Right.
You can look at it and see, hey, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense, but at least you can get an idea if it's something that you're interested in.
And don't let, and I've done this and I've seen people say, hey, life insurance is bad or annuities are bad. And it's not. They're not. They're a tool. If that tool works for you, then you should look into it. If it's not, you say, okay, well, now I've made peace with that and I've put monies aside for future care if I ever need it. The only thing I'll tell you, people that put aside money for future care, all of a sudden things happen, life happens, and you start pulling money out of that account. The nice thing, if you have it in some type of a life insurance or annuity, it's kind of like your hands in the cookie jar, right? You can't access that. It's there, it's a plan, and it's set up for care if you ever need it. And remember, with the insurance products, they're designed to come back to you. If you don't use them, you're going to get money back, tax-free money back. So again, our contact information is going to be up there. And I think we're just going to open it up to see if we have some questions.
Oh, Nancy has something to add.
I just want, well, first of all, thank you very much. And this option of a life insurance policy or an annuity to be able to assist with costs certainly it seems like a wonderful idea, and glad to have these experts to go to. I guess I just wanted to make clear that the care that you might want to choose can definitely be provided by a visiting Christian Science nurse or at a Christian Science facility. The prices that were up there are not necessarily our prices. But just to know that long-term care is a term that is helpful to understand with regards to this insurance. But when you have a care need, that's what our wonderful Christian Science nursing facilities are all about, providing that need, and it doesn't have to be long-term, as John said. God is the provider of long-term care. He never gives up on his long-term care. It's always available. So yes, I just wanted to make those two points.
Well, that's really good, Nancy, and we appreciate it. Katie and myself are both Christians, but we're not Christian Scientists. So if we say the wrong thing, we're really only trying to help.
No, of course you are, and you're doing a great job.
A non-Christian Scientist, I mean, I love Christian Scientists, and so I apologize if I say or something that's not, politically correct. But we really do just try and help, and we're really good about showing options, whether you want to do it or not. But
what you've presented is really a great financial option for planning for this type of care, and I 100% support that. I just wanted to make clear that these options of actually receiving this care, it's not that you have to go out and find something other than Christian Science care.
Right.
Just hoping that that's clear.
Yeah, and you know what we always talk about, because we bring up Ardenwood or back on the East Coast, right, the VA, and we always say, you should have a conversation with them. You can call and you can talk to them about spiritual healing. And I know a big question that we get a lot of times, I'm going to guess someone's going to ask it tonight, is, what about, can I use my Medicare policy or my long-term care policy if I go into a RINKI, right, a religious non-Christian
non-medical
healthcare institution, right? I mean, they ask, we get that quite a bit. So Nancy, maybe you can shed some light on that too as we go through the questions.
Sure.
Great. Well, we've got a number of questions here. Let's get underway. Great job, folks. The first question is, I am a veteran. Does TRICARE for Life work at Ardenwood? And how does that work out?
Yeah, so TRICARE for Life, government-sponsored healthcare assistance, acts as a Medicare supplemental policy. So it will support it'll cover the deductibles and coinsurance should your care need be at the Medicare level. I am not familiar with it handling any kind of long-term care. Jim, Katie, do you
Yeah,
know?
I'm not sure either, but I wanted to add, Nancy, that so for TRICARE, there's a difference between TRICARE and VA, right? We get that quite a bit. With TRICARE, when you turn 65, you need to enroll for Medicare Parts A and B. That normally becomes your primary insurance. And then TRICARE, like Nancy said, would act as a supplemental coverage. With VA, you don't have to enroll for Parts A and B because we get that actually quite a bit
A
too.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's very helpful. Next up, you mentioned practical care. What do you mean by that?
So when we're talking about practical care, that is when you're getting care at home, practical being the day-to-day stuff that needs to happen. You need help, someone to help you making food. You need help maybe running some errands, stuff like that. So when we're talking about Jim's mother-in-law, that's what his wife is doing. She's doing that practical care. She's going over, helping make sure she's bathed, getting her something to eat, taking her out to eat.
Prepping meals, right? Shopping. And really, you think everything. They do everything for her. They really do. So that's what we mean by the practical side. Because people, and again, John, we really try really hard with Christian Scientists. We never mean to offend or say, we believe in spiritual healing too, and we want that to be first priority. But sometimes as we age, you may need a little assistance with the practical side. That's what we really mean by that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next up, I do not live near a Christian Science facility.
Yeah.
Is a plan recommended for me?
A lot of that has to do, well, probably, yes. We would obviously have to talk more about your situation. But really it's what do you want that care to be? So sometimes a different long-term care policy would be recommended if I don't live by a Christian Science facility. I know some people we talk to live in a remote area where they go, listen, having, Christian Science nurse or practitioner help really isn't something that I can do. So it's really, really based on your own situation for sure.
Right. Yes.
Great. Next question. I don't have any sort of long-term care policy. How do I start? Where do I start?
That's a really good
That's
question.
a good question for you guys.
Right? So the easiest way is, quite honestly, is to call us or email us, and then we can ask you some questions. We're never going to make a recommendation unless we know something about your finances, because sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. As a matter of fact, the long-term care insurance industry requires us to know something about it. We can't just randomly say, John, you should take $1 million policy out. Yeah, that'd be perfect for you without knowing something about you. So we ask questions, and we ask about children and what their plan is. And sometimes people go, well, I'm not sure if I have a plan. Well, you need to have a plan, and this is a start. So you look at what options are available, what the cost is, what you can afford. And if it suits your needs, then you go ahead and you do it. You have to be healthy enough to qualify for any of these plans, first off. And fortunately, God has blessed Christian Scientists with incredible health. I know that. So normally they can qualify for it by answering no to the health questions. But then it's a personal decision, right? You think about it, and if you have the assets, you think, should I protect those, or should I try and, like Katie said, we leverage our money, right? Can I turn 100 into 300 or something like that? So, but we look at everything. We really pride ourselves in not saying it's one size fits all. An annuity may be appropriate for John, indemnity plan may be appropriate for Nancy. We don't know until we ask questions. And And it's important, right? If we don't ask questions, we're just going to say, okay, here's company ABC and their policy for you.
Perfect. And that's why we have these webinars, don't we? This is so
Yeah.
helpful. Next, I have money set aside in a CD for my care. Should I need it? My children know where it is, but I'm not sure if I have enough set aside. Would a long-term care plan be better for me?
So we talk to people all the time in this situation. And a lot of times it's looking at, what if we took that money and we take it out of the CD, and what if we put it with an insurance company? What can that get you? And does that make sense?
Right.
Really,
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
And we've been talking about, that example I just did and this was for a client, 65-year-old in California. And that was her option. She was kind of going, well, I have money set aside. And I said, why don't we look at this annuity? And I go, well, and she's the same, well, I heard annuities. My brother-in-law said annuities are bad. And I go, okay, everybody says they're bad, but it's a tool. And so we looked at that versus life insurance, and she liked the annuity because the money is guaranteed, it goes in. And in that case, it turned the 100 into, what did we say, 525,000 when she was in her 80s. So that's leverage. That's taking your money from the CD. Plus, it kind of keeps you from dipping in, right? If an emergency happens, I go, well, I've got that money there for care. I'm just going to take a little bit out and help my child buy a home or something like that. So it kind of prevents you from doing that. It's set aside, it's earmarked for that care. If you don't need it, it's going to go tax-free to your beneficiary with a life insurance policy. So we look at all those options, quite honestly.
Perfect. When applying for a policy, a long-term care insurance policy, is there only a questionnaire or is there a medical examination involved?
That's a good question.
Most of the ones that we're working with do not require any sort of, they call it like a paramed, like a medical examination. A lot of them do it just based on phone calls. Sometimes they'll, a lot of times, they also want to do an evaluation, make sure you're not having any cognitive issues. But we would never tell you to apply for a plan that required any sort of paramed exam if that wasn't something that you were comfortable with ahead of time.
And John and Nancy, we've been trying to help Christian Scientists for a long time, and we go to the insurance companies and we explain how healthy you are, how God has blessed you, and it scares them because you don't have medical history. And the non-Christian Science world, everybody sees doctors. You have medical records, so the insurance company's going, where's their medical records? And I go, that's not how a Christian Scientist, their belief, and they normally don't see a medical provider. It scares them. Even though I go, they're the healthiest population I have ever worked with, going on 35 years. They go, well, we're not sure. So sometimes some of the companies, and this goes back to the paramed exam, says, well, if we don't know anything about John, for example, we want a nurse to come out and they'll ask you health questions. They normally weigh you, take your height and weight, blood pressure. They want to make sure you're healthy enough. And anything, if it's invasive, then you can just simply say, no, I don't want to do it. But realize we're trying to find companies that are Christian Science friendly, and it's really, really hard. Because in this environment, right, with the high inflation, it's really, they want to ensure a really good risk. And right now, they can't, and John, I'm just using you, for example, I know your height and weight, you're in excellent health, but they don't know that. And they go, well, we can't go to John's doctor because John doesn't see a doctor, so we don't have records to pull. So it scares them. Even though I go, listen, I would insure people like John and Nancy. If I'm going to start an insurance company, I honestly, I'm going to work with a Christian Scientist because they just don't understand it. They really, so I guess the long answer is yes, they can say you may need to have a paramed, but we let people know.
That's a question we ask before we start really getting into things.
Yeah.
Some people have done life insurance and understand a paramed and they're okay with that. And some people aren't. And so we would not ever say, okay, we're going to look towards this insurance company if you're not comfortable with that. We respect comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Great answer. Thank you. I'm confused about long-term care and a RINKI, or a religious non-healthcare, a religious non-medical healthcare institution. I thought Medicare took care of that.
Mm.
Well,
Nancy, I'm gonna let you do this one.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because we do have to keep repeating that
Yes.
that very important information.
Mhm.
Medicare does pay at a RINKI. We're grateful for that benefit, but it is only for care needs that are equivalent to inpatient care at a hospital. Um, and so it is not, it does not cover this so-called long-term kind of a need.
Exactly
So,
right.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and furthermore, hey, don't forget about our friend Plan G, right? If you're going on a Medicare approved stay and you have a supplement Plan G, I'm surprised when you get because it's hard. People want
That's
to know
coming,
about
Jim.
that, right? If it was a Medicare approved stay, Nancy, and plan they have a supplemental Plan G, then they would be covered, right?
Yep.
For as long as they're receiving spiritual care,
Sure.
spiritual
And
healing.
just to be clear, I'm thinking most people might know this, but at a facility like Ardenwood, we have 2 levels of Christian Science nursing care that we offer. One is that Medicare level. And at that level, the individual would be cared for by a journal-listed nurse who was very experienced in taking care of what seemed to be a serious need. We also offer our lighter care, and that is the kind of care that is not at that higher level, but is and our Christian Science nurses can also provide that care, but it might not have to be someone who has 20 years of experience. It might be a nurse that has 3 or 4 years of experience that can take care of your need. Um, um, and so some of these, what they describe as activities of daily living, are needs that that our Christian Science nurses take care of on our floor. So we are taking care of some of these types of needs all currently.
Great, thank you. And of course, this is a clarifying question. You are offering to something called a paramed. What is this? I don't understand what that means.
I'll answer this since I threw that out. They call it a paramed. That's what the insurance companies call it. That is just the terminology used for a medical examination in order to get a life insurance policy or a long-term care policy. And like Jim said, they come out, they'll do height, weight, blood pressure, stuff like that. So the paramed just is the medical examination that some require and some, like I said, some do not.
Sometimes we don't know. I mean, they're saying, well, based on their health history, there is none. They're incredibly healthy, so therefore we need to send a paramed exam out because we have to find out for sure if they're hiding anything, right? So normally that's where a nurse comes out and would ask you all the health questions, things like that, just to make sure. Not that they don't believe you, but they want to get a second opinion. And normally, if somebody else is asking the health questions, they just want to make sure and confirm everything. So,
yeah, that's what the paramed. It just means the medical examination.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I would say just everyone's doing what they're doing their due diligence. This is due diligence on their part. We do it too at Ardenwood. We often will send out a visiting Christian Science nurse just to see, how is this individual? We get a call from a practitioner, we get a call from a family member that might be out of town. Say, would you please check on mom? Would you please check on grandpa? So, I mean, everyone's trying to do the right thing. So I think these are great questions and great answers. Next up, what should I tell my children about the care I want? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, like John, have a plan, right? I would
Have a
just tell
plan.
them, this is if my goal and my wishes are to go to a Christian Science facility, you want to express that to them. And I know we've talked to numerous Christian Scientists, and I know sometimes adult children are Christian Scientists and sometimes they're not, right? And So everybody wants to know what your plan is and how you're going to finance that plan. I believe in being open. Like I have 3 adult sons, and I'm just totally honest and transparent, saying, you know, I have a plan. It's paid for because I don't want you sending me somewhere where I don't want to go. My
That's
wife
it.
and myself, I did that a long time ago. So they know, hey, Dad's got a plan. He's got the money for it. I go, that's right. Now I can stay where I want to stay. But it's really important. And even the holidays sometimes are awkward, but it's, you know, that's when families get together and you got, sooner or later, you have to have that conversation. Right?
Being an adult child, that is a conversation that my husband and I have had with my parents, with my in-laws. I can tell you who has a plan, who doesn't, what they want to do. I guess that's part of being in this industry.
Katie's mother-in-law's plan is I'm going to stay with them, and I go, I don't think that's a good plan for Katie's husband.
Out already.
Yeah, that's right. It's important that
that was
understand that that's not an option for her. Right?
Yeah,
it's just not.
That was a very tough conversation of like, listen, that's not a practical thing for you to have a room picked out because we are not adequately prepared to. We have kids, we have stuff going on. Right. So I'm proof sometimes it is not an easy conversation, but it has to be had.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, these conversations must occur. I know that we had a loved one that had a real need and there wasn't really a plan. So I was grateful that my own mother, I just was sharing that with her, the challenges we were having, and boy, she went out and got a plan. You know, so I know that she's fully taken care of, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
Yes.
So that makes all the difference.
Love, right? I love my children. I don't ever want them to be in a position where they have to change their life, my grandchildren's lives, to provide care for me. That's my responsibility. So 20 years ago, my wife and myself, I said, I'm going to do something about it because I see it all the time. And we took policies out that are fully paid up and they just keep increasing in value. And I told my kids, I don't trust you where you're going to put me, but now I have a plan. Here's the policies, right? And we're set. You don't have to worry about it. And you have power of attorney if you need it. And it's peace of mind for everybody, John. It really is.
Yeah, you can determine the care that you want. And that's why you have a plan, because they say, honey, this is what I want for myself. And families honor that, hopefully.
It's weird.
But it also helps you financially.
4 seasons?
Yeah, no, I was saying something about the 4 seasons. If you can afford it. But we joke about it, but the money's set aside specifically for that, right? It really is.
Right. Honey, you're not going to the 4 seasons. You'll see the 4 seasons.
And of course, just to reiterate, this is where the Advanced Healthcare Directive document fits into
precisely
for that question that said, how do I do a plan?
Right.
So that's a good place to start as well, to look at that document, and it has different questions and might help you be more specific about your wishes, or think through what your wishes are. Yeah.
Can't emphasize that enough. Boy, an AHCD or an Advanced Healthcare Directive is absolutely essential. Next up, if you have an annuity and you need long-term care, you cash in your annuity and spend it however with the facility you want in order to pay them, or what's the best suggestion for?
So there's all kinds of annuities out there, right? There's ones for growth. There's one that generate more for income, and you can have joint payouts for a spouse. But the ones we're talking about provide a specific long-term care benefit. In that example we used earlier, that where the monies grew to $525,000. I know it because I just did it. It generated about $8,000 a month, paid over, what was it, 72 months in that example. And it increases every year. We had an inflation rider on that. So you still have that annuity, but it's paying out for as long as you need that care. So.
But Jim, it's limited to a certain amount each month. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly, Nancy. Yeah. So if the question was, if I had an annuity, I mean, you could certainly if you have an old annuity, you could cash it out, but you're going to take a big tax hit. So that probably wouldn't be a smart move. I've done where people have certain annuities and they go, it's just sitting there. I said, well, you know, you can transfer it. The government, this is what the government likes, because you can transfer it tax-free. When the government's saying you can do that tax-free, they want you to do that. They want you to be able to provide your own care and not fall back on the government. So in that example, if instead of cashing it out, you may want to transfer it in while you're healthy enough, but you always reserve the right to cash out if you want to. But remember, you're going to pay taxes, because annuities are tax deferred, meaning when you pull the money out of there, you're going to pay that as ordinary income first. So,
Exactly.
Jim, could you speak to also what would trigger a payment? What kind of documents does the insurance or annuity company need in order for them to start paying that benefit?
yeah, that's a really good question.
So they call it triggering the benefits is the terminology they use. So almost pretty much all of the plans require a certification that you can't meet 2 of those activities of daily living, or that you're having a cognitive issue. So you can have like a doctor, a nurse practitioner, social worker. I think we've seen chiropractors on that list. So there's a lot of different provider types that can do that certification. And then once they do that certification, obviously you don't have to keep going to that provider or anything like that. But there has to be some way that the insurance company can prove that you need help with those activities of daily living, rather than me just calling and saying,
I need the money.
I need help.
Right.
Yeah.
In the past, we did have long-term care policies. I think SHIP was one of the insurers, which they don't offer the policy any longer, where they actually had a rider where Christian Science nursing facility would qualify instead of a licensed facility, and such type of a certification from an outside provider was not needed. Is there any insurer that you're working with that might have that aspect where it wouldn't have to be a doctor that Christian Scientists would have to go to qualify to trigger this?
Normally not any longer. So they insurance companies go based on, they call it Social Security's definition of a provider, and that's where like we've seen chiropractor as part of that, a social worker. So we've seen others, but it's normally some sort of medical personnel that would have to answer
Right.
that.
Yeah, registered nurse, right? With what we see too is when they need help, you know, like Katie said, triggering those benefits. Most home healthcare agencies have somebody like a registered nurse on staff that can say, yes, I can go out and assess them, and they do need help with the practical side of care, and they qualify. Therefore, they can start receiving the payments from their policy.
Thank you.
Well, Nancy, you just answered our last question, because the last question we had for today, and we're just after 5 o'clock, as we know, it said, I have a long-term care policy with a Christian Science rider on it. Is that what I need? So
Great. Yeah, I was hoping that that I'd have a chance to speak to that, because some of you listening today may already have a long-term care policy, the old-fashioned kind that Jim mentioned, where you've been paying a premium every month to maintain this policy. And yes, if your policy has a Christian Science rider, which is a document that is a page in your policy that says wherever hospital is mentioned, Christian Science nursing facility can be substituted, or wherever a skilled nursing facility, it could be a Christian Science nursing facility. And that's an important thing to have in your policy. And if you have that, then it does indeed mean that your care needs, if you had these activities of daily living that you needed assistance with, then it would pay. And long-term care policies pay to you. They don't pay to the facility. Medicare pays the facility, but long-term care policies pay to you. And so then you would get the benefit and could pay your bill, supplement your bill with these payments.
And Nancy,
so look in your files, and if you have a policy, SHIP is the one I've seen most here at Ardenwood that We have 2 or 3 patients in the last year that had a SHIP policy that helped supplement their payments, their bill for their sheltered care needs. So,
Okay.
And I guess this will make this our last question. I have to put my glasses on. It's a little bit longer. Both my mom and mother-in-law carried SCS for years, or Serving Christian Scientists for years. But when it came time for need, it didn't cover what they thought it would. Still paid out of pocket for care. Good point, Nancy.
yes. So SCS, as I understood it, Serving Christian Scientists,
Mhm.
their policies were more what Jim and Katie were referring to as indemnity. And so that meant that they would simply pay you a certain amount, $150 a day, if you were admitted to a Christian Science facility or other particular triggers. And so yes, they didn't have the rich benefit that Katie and Jim are talking about. A lot richer, up to $8,000 a month is a very good benefit. But SCS was a wonderful insurance company and did meet the needs for a good number of people. And
But it's time, but it's really right. Yeah.
mhm.
Well, Jim, Katie, Nancy, thank you for guiding us through the ins and outs of long-term care insurance options for Christian Scientists. Jim is the best qualified to answer questions on this subject, and so is Katie, and Ardenwood can serve as an ongoing resource. Please don't hesitate to call with questions at any time. We stand by ready to help. Their contact information will appear on the screen at the end of this webinar. And thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again online for our annual meeting featuring inspirational speaker Madeline Maupin. That's Sunday, May 5th at 2 p.m. Pacific. Please visit our website to register. And also save the date for our Christmas celebration on Sunday, December 8th at 2 p.m. Pacific. Thank you again, and goodbye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice seeing everybody.